Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel for another video. This is Cassie. Today we're going to be doing the Simon Says Stamp February kit, which is called Season of Sentiments. But before we get into what is in this kit, I thought I would show you a lovely little kitty who decided to sit on that box before I could actually show you what was in it. But as far as I know, this kit is still available, so I'll have it linked down below. I'm also going to have the individual pieces available just in case the kit goes sold out. Simon Says Stamp always does a really good job of having some of those other things linked in. And if you do hear some bells, that's my boys in the background. Boys meaning cats. All right, so now let's jump into it. We have a mesh bag. I absolutely love that they are including those on occasion. They're big, they're beautiful, they fit all the cardstock without having to cut it down, and so they're really nice. We also have a piece of candy. We have the Tim Holtz Idea-ology locks and keys. We also have some Simon Says Stamp, or a Miss You die. That is really pretty nice. Love that one. We also have the Simon Says Stamp Simply Thank You 3x4 stamp set. Good sentiments there. We have a dot runner by Simon Says Stamp. Then we have our little coupon code, and I'll remember to link that down below. We also have two envelopes by Simon Says Stamp. We have cotton candy and mint. Very nice. We have a 6x6 piece of glitter paper by Simon Says Stamp. Then we have the 6x8 12 sheets of Simple Stories Happy Hearts. And these are really, really pretty. I love this color combination for Valentine's Day, or just in general. It's just a really pretty color combo. So I had a hard time picking which papers I wanted to use because, you know, you only have one sheet of each of these, and they're really, really pretty. So the leftover ones I have, I'm definitely saving. And then you've got a lot of those little fun things. Then we have the 6x8 stamp set called Orchid Rose. It's gorgeous. So if you are a colorer or you love florals, it's for you. Then we have the idea sheet, and then we have cardstocks and the color mint, fog, cotton candy, and surf blue. All right, let's get into our first card. I have some of the fog cardstock I cut down to 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches. I'm going to score that at 4.25 inches to make this a side folding A2 size card. So that's our base. And you'll notice I have some mint cardstock. I went ahead and put that into my Misty. And I'm going to grab out the stamp. You're going to see how gigantic this stamp is. It's so cool. It's big, it's beautiful, and it can cover a lot of ground. And I'm going to be honest with you, when I was making these cards, I was not feeling the coloring. And it's not to say that I won't in the future. I just wasn't feeling it this time. So I did want to share some cards that mostly focus on just using the stamp as it is. So, you know, you might have a stamp like this and maybe you're not feeling the coloring. You can still pull it out and use it. And here's one way to show you. So I'm stamping that down a couple of times with my blackout ink by Ink on 3. Having a little problem area there, but got it figured out. And then I went ahead and fussy cut this part out. And then I thought I'd play around with the Copics, maybe not coloring it full force, but thinking, okay, since this is green cardstock, let me just bring in some green and see if I can add some shadowing and shading to it and see what I think. And I did a little bit, but in the end, I was not feeling it. So you might like the idea of it. Maybe that's something you can take and run with, but I wasn't feeling it. So next part is I'm going to take this panel of some of the pattern paper that I cut down to 3.75 inches by 5.5 inches. And I'm going to glue that down to my card base, leaving a 1/2 inch of that fog cardstock showing on the right hand side. And then I'll glue down just a portion of the stamp, or of this cutout image of the stamp using our liquid glue. You could use some foam tape. That would really add some dimension and some fun to it. But I'm not concerned about this hanging off the edge because we're going to pull in that guillotine trimmer and trim all of that down on both sides because I did have it hanging off the side just a little bit. And then you'll see that. The next part would be to stamp our sentiments. I'm going to pull in this Sentiment Stock by Pear Blossom Press. This stuff is phenomenal. If you've watched me before, you've heard me say that. This is some of the best, probably the best I've ever used for actually doing black sentiments, or white on black, or probably any embossing really. It's just so smooth that the powder doesn't stick where it's not supposed to. It's just unlike anything. So I've heat embossed that, and then I trimmed it down, and I'm going to glue my sentiments down on the front of our card. And then you could come in with some other embellishments, but I'm going to stop there, and that's going to finish off our first card. So I really like how that one turned out. Card number 2 is going to have 0 stamping. So once again, we'll start with a card base just like before. I wanted to show you a way that you can doctor up your paper pieces. Now you can obviously just put those down, no big deal, and that would make a very pretty card. But I'm going to show you a way to doctor it up a little bit. So I love that dark blue background on the one with the heart balloons, but I love the bouquet here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fussy cut around this bouquet, leaving a nice little blue border. And this is actually going to fit very, very nicely right over the top of those hearts. So that's what I'm going to do. And yeah, there's the sentiment down there, but we're going to take care of that as well. So I've got a strip of some cotton candy cardstock, and it almost completely goes over that sentiment. I'll show you a way we're going to deal with that too, that little line and dot underneath the word soar. We're going to just kind of play on that. We're gonna embrace it. So I'm sticking that down with a little bit of glue, and I'm gonna flip this over and cut off any of the excess. But this whole time I'm playing with liquid glue, forgetting that I've got the dot runner sitting right there. So I'll eventually grab that. I put some foam tape behind our bouquet, and I'm going to stick that on top of the balloons, and that's one way to kind of step it up. See what can play over the top of something else, and then you add this dimension to it. Now I do have a tool that I can rough up the edges, but I cannot seem to find it. I'm sure it's in one of my drawers and it's just being covered right now, but I didn't feel like searching, so I'm just going to take the edge of my scissors and I'm going to rough up the edges of this paper. And I'm even going to add a couple of notches to it. I'll just cut some little triangles in the side to make it look like the paper's been roughed up quite a bit. And then I'll stick that on top and kind of see how I feel about that. And I'll add another notch on top. Once again, just cutting a little triangle into it and then roughing up those edges. And then this is where I grab still the liquid glue because, you know, even though that tape runner or the dot runner is staring me in the face, I'm forgetting that it's there. So I'll use this liquid glue one last time. And then I'll pop down my piece on top of this paper that I've cut down to about 4 inches by 5.5 inches. And then I did that a little crooked, and then I'll stick this down on top. Now, see, dot runner isn't something that I typically grab because I want something nice and strong. But this Simon Says stamp one seems to be holding pretty well. So here's what I'm saying about playing with and going along with the dot and the line. I'm going to grab in a white gel pen, and we're just going to mimic that. We're going to go all around the edge of our paper, just kind of keeping squiggly lines, nothing really straight, adding a few dots here and there. And then no one's going to be the wiser that what you saw underneath there was actually part of the sentiment. It looks like I added that on purpose. So there you go. And then I'm going to use that tape runner. We're going to glue this down to the front of our cardstock. Now you could add more embellishment if you wanted to, or maybe take one of the sentiments that I have sitting there and you could stamp that on the inside of the card. But I'm going to leave this one just saying for you. That'll give me a lot of options for it, and I can add sentiment later if I would like. So there you have it. There is card number 2. Card number 3 is going to be a slim line, so I cut down that cotton candy cardstock, and my card panel measures 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches. And once again, I'm going to grab out that stamp, and we're going to ink that up with some picked raspberry distress oxide ink. Once again, I wasn't really feeling the coloring it right now. Like I said, that's not to say in the future I won't, because this is a beautiful stamp set. It might have just been the time of day for me. I'm not sure, but I just thought that these would be some fun ways to show you that there are other ways to use this stamp rather than just having to color it. So I stamped that down onto that cotton candy cardstock, and I love the pink on pink. I have a couple pieces of the pattern paper trimmed down. I'm going to set that off to the side, and then I'm going to take this piece with the Miss You die, and we're going to run the Miss You part 3 times on this piece of the pattern paper, so it'll be a little bit thicker, and then the shadow will be cut out of the glitter cardstock. I am going to use the liquid glue to adhere these together, and I'm using some reverse tweezers to do so. And then once those are all 3 lined on top of each other, I'll use that same liquid glue and put that down on top of the glitter cardstock. You are going to want something like liquid glue. The dot runner isn't going to hold that in place on top of glitter. So just a suggestion that you use some sort of liquid glue there. And then once all that is put together, I put a stamp block on top to make sure that it's not going anywhere. I'm going to kind of check out the placement of how everything is going to be laid out. Sorry, it's off screen. We'll move it up, and then we'll grab our dot runner. Almost grabbed the liquid glue because it's such a habit for me. But I'm going to line this up on my glass mat. And I will say that dot runner is very nice. Of all the dot runners that I have used, or glue dots, and I haven't used a lot to be honest with you, this one is very nice. It gives you a little bit of wiggle room, which is good. And so far everything seems to be holding very well. And I'll use that on the back of our Miss You, and then we'll stick that down. And of course you could come in with other embellishments on the top here, like some sort of baubles or something like that, but I'm going to leave it as is. And then for our card base, it's more of that cotton candy, and this is cut down to 7 inches by 8.5 inches, scored at 3.5 inches. And that will be our base. And then you could, of course, bring in the stamp and stamp on the inside a little bit if you wanted to. There's all kinds of options for how you could decorate the inside, maybe even use some other sentiments, but I'm leaving that open to maybe write a bit more. And then use that dot runner to adhere the panel down to the base. And that's going to finish off card number 3. Card number 4 is another no stamping card. So I loved this panel so much that I'm going to cut it down and put it on the 5x7 sheet, or a 5x7 card base. And so, yeah, I'm going to lose a little bit of my typewriter, but I just thought this page was so cute. You could frame these, you could have all kinds of fun with these, but I'm going to doctor it up again. And we're just trimming this down. I should have actually measured, but instead of measuring, I'm going to just grab out the card base, hold that in place, put that into my guillotine trimmer, and then trim away the piece that I don't need. And that will be the full front. I end up trimming this down even more later because I do want some of that card base showing, but I love this panel. A typewriter. Oh my gosh, it brings me back to 4th grade learning how to type on a typewriter. Anyway, so what I've decided is I have another one of those little sentiment things, and I thought, how fun would that be to have that come out of the typewriter? So I'm going to use an X-Acto knife, and of course, Max has decided to come in here and sit on my lap. It always freaks me out when I'm using something sharp. Messy, not even as much, but when there's something sharp, it freaks me out. Not like he's a toddler and he's going to grab it, but it just still, I can't, ugh. So I'm going to need to trim this down a little bit on each of the edges, and I love how it says, love you to the moon and back. And you can definitely tell that Max is my cat. He loves paper. He loves these little paper pieces. He wants them so desperately. But I am going to use those, so he can't have them. He couldn't have them anyway because he likes to shred it. So, all right, so I'm going to stick that in there. It's going to work well. It's going to cover mostly the other piece behind it. And then we're going to doctor this up again. So I'm going to take the edge of my scissors, and we're going to rough up the edges, and we're going to trim it and add some of those little paper cuts in it as well, even though that probably wouldn't go through a typewriter very well if it did have all those cuts on it. Or if it was roughed up, it probably wouldn't go through very well either. But yeah, I don't know how many of you remember using a typewriter. I actually filled out college applications with a typewriter. That's how old I am. Anyway, so once I get that done, I decide I want to add a little bit of color. So I'm going to bring in some Distress Oxide in the color Salvaged Patina. But we're going to roll that top first. I want to add some dimension here because typewriters usually always made your paper rolled up a little, so they weren't perfectly flat when they came out. So I keep checking that to see how that's going to look, and this is when I decide that I want to pull in that Salvaged Patina. It is just a little bit darker than our background, and so I like that. It's going to add like some grunge without really being grunge. And I'm just going to run that pad along the edge of my paper, and it just scuffs it up a bit, I guess. Adds some of that color, frames it a little bit, which I love. And then we'll put this in there. And before I do that, I'm going to take these little pieces that Max wanted so desperately, and now he knows he's not going to get them, so I think he took off. He's over it. And I'm going to stick these down. So there are always ways, without, if you decide you don't want to do some stamping, there are always ways to dress up the paper itself. Just by adding extra paper here and there, you can really, really just add to what you got going on. And I think it's fun. That way it doesn't feel like, I don't want to say cheating. That's not right. But without doing some stamping, sometimes us stampers feel like, well, that's not really making a card. It is, because you're playing with the paper. So I'm going to glue down the piece to the, I put it through the slit and glued it in there, added a little bit of foam tape to the front, the top part, and then it's going to look like it's popped up. And then here's where I decide I need to trim this down just a tiny bit more, because I really do want some of that base to show. So I'll bring in the salvaged patina again and add it just to those edges that I cut off. And I end up saving some of those pieces you see on the side and using on the inside of this card. So again, no stamping, but you can use pieces of paper on the inside of your card as well. And here comes Miles. You know, it's funny, Max will sit on my lap and watch, but Miles has got to be right up in your business. All right, so I'll tape that down with the tape runner, and then that finishes off card number 4. Another fun one, but with no stamping. All right, our final project for today is actually a tag. I want to start doing these a little bit more, and I was so just inspired by that Idea-ology locks and keys that I was like, I'm going to make a tag. So I pulled out some of my tags that I have. These are the Ranger tags, and I'm going to fussy cut around this portion of our patterned paper. It's just so pretty, and I wanted to add that to the edge of our tag. And I also want to do some stamping. So because I plan to do some other mixed media type things on this tag, I've pulled out my archival inks. You do want to be concerned about that. Like if you're planning to do anything with water or anything like that, you'd want to pick an ink that is permanent, and the archival inks will, I mean, once they're down, baby, they are down. So I've pulled out this coffee archival ink. I kind of debated thinking about the blue, the faded jeans, but I ended up, I really just wanted that coffee archival ink. So I'm going to ink up my stamp, and I'm going to stamp this down. It will kind of stain your stamp, but I'm not worried about that. It doesn't affect the stamping. Making sure that I have good coverage, and I actually didn't have perfect coverage, but that's okay. This is a tag and this is a background, so I'm not worried about it. I do sort of stamp it down again, and it kind of gives a little bit of a double stamp, but you really can't see it. I can see it because I know it's there, but I think it looks good. I like the variation in the ink. All right, I looked everywhere for my gel matte medium by Ranger, and I think I must have used it all up and did not replace it. So I've pulled out some clear gesso, which works the same, pretty close to the same. This just isn't going to give, I mean, it'll give a matte finish, and this stuff is a little bit gritty. This is by Liquitex. It will hold all your pieces down. I know right now it's not looking like it is. And the other thing that it's going to do is seal your project. So that's kind of important when you're working with paper. If you want to be able to do things on top of it, you sort of have to seal it, unless you're working with like a mixed media paper and you don't care if it soaks into the paper a little bit. But this is just going to create a barrier, which is kind of nice. And it'll also, like I said, work like glue. I know this whole time I'm using it, you're probably looking at it going, doesn't look like it's working, but believe me, everything stays put. It isn't moving. It's staying where it's supposed to. But I like to put the glue down, or the gesso down, and then I like to put a little bit of gesso over the top of it to seal it. Because again, we're just working with paper here, and when you work with wet medium over the top of that paper, or if you color over the top of it, it's not going to move as easily. So by doing this, I'm sealing it. And then I'm going to cut out one of the words from one of the pattern paper that just says hugs and kisses. I thought that was really, really cute on there. So we'll stick that one down as well. And then the next step would be to just heat set all of this to make sure that everything is nice and dry before I move on to the next step. So I'm just using my heat gun, making sure that everything is nice and dry, and then I can cut off the excess bits. And we got a tag ready to go. I'm going to pull out my Neo color. These are by, I have it written down. Oh, they're Caran d'Ache, sorry. They're really, really nice. These are like artist quality. I know that Tim Holtz has crayons and those work great. This, I just have such an array of colors, and I've had these for a little bit of time, and they're just so much fun to play with. You can use a paintbrush right from the crayon. It gives you this, it's not like using regular watercolor. It's kind of opaque, which is nice. So I like to put my color down. You can use a paintbrush, but then I also like to use my fingers to spread that around and, mess it up a little bit. But you can go with those crayons right over the top of the wet that you've already done too, and it melts that crayon a little bit more. So I brought in a brown now, and then I'm going to bring in that blue a little bit more. I'll go take the brown and do it around the flowers, and I'll use my paintbrush and my finger, just kind of going back and forth. I think that's one of the things I like about mixed media is that, you know, it's a little bit messy. It doesn't necessarily have to be, but I like getting my hands right up in there. I like spreading the color that way. It's just kind of fun. And then I decide I want to bring in some more of that blue and do the edge with the blue again, just because I really like that blue on there. It's just really, really pretty. And I like how it's just kind of sitting on top. It's fun. So once again, I'm going to, I did heat set that just a little bit. I'm going to bring in some distress paint. This is a brown one. This one I think is the walnut stain. And I'm going to splatter that all over the background. I put it in my makeshift splatter box. And the reason you want to do that is because that paint is permanent. So there's another thing that's not going anywhere. And then I like to match my ribbons. So I've got this ribbon. I'm going to spray that with some distress spray stain. And that's just in the walnut stain as well. And then I'm going to take some twine and wind that around a bunch and attach that lock. And then I'll put my ribbon on. And then once that's on, that's going to finish off our tag. What a fun project. I definitely want to make more of these. It's just so much fun to do. All right, so now let's go ahead and take a look at all the projects that I made for you today. I would love to know which was your favorite. If you did, in fact, have a favorite, go ahead and leave that down in the comment section down below. Big thanks for watching, y'all, and for leaving the feedback that you do, and for just being who you guys are. It's pretty incredible to me what a wonderful community this is. So thanks for stopping by. If you like this video, hit that like button and consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And as always, I'll see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.